Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, good evening. We have a treat in store tonight. We have with us two extraordinary individuals, two remarkable public servants, two great representatives of their own countries, but who've actually have a vision of the region, and not just the region, but the world that extends well beyond the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the State of Israel. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I think it could hardly be more timely given the events in the region. So to my immediate left is His Royal Highness Prince Turki Al-Faisal, who served, as you saw in the program, as the head of intelligence for the kingdom, as well as the ambassador to the US, and who has come to visit us from time to time, but not often enough. We also have Dan Meridor, whom I'm especially proud to say has spent a month with us this time, having come for a shorter period earlier and decided that we were friendly. Okay? Dan, in his previous job, was the number 2 in the government of Israel, the deputy prime minister to Bibi Netanyahu, and also the chief civilian responsible for intelligence, and has had a very distinguished career there, but has also been a very good friend of the Belfer Center here at the Kennedy School and of Harvard. So for our discussion tonight, we're going to start with the Middle East, but we're going to go from there. And we're not quite sure, since we're going to open to everybody in the room, questions on almost any topic will be relevant, because these two gentlemen not only think about their own countries and think about the region of the Middle East, but have views about the world. So I would say stay tuned. Okay? So if you didn't know much, and we're just looking at the Mideast today, if we can take the first slide. I guess probably the newspaper would say, is the Mideast burning? Or maybe less politely, are things going to hell, and how fast? So here, I just noted for you geographically, you've got wars or civil wars going on in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Libya, and even to some extent Egypt. There are 9 million refugees from the Syrian conflict, where more than 200,000 people have been killed. You have apparently irreconcilable differences between Iran and Saudi, extremes and moderates, Shiites and Sunnis. If we were looking at this, you'd say things seem to be getting worse, and as somebody said recently, they would expect they get worse before they get worse. So you both come from the region. How do you see what's happening in this region today? Maybe we start with Prince Turki.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Allison. This is a great privilege for me to address an audience as daunting as this. And also gives me a feeling perhaps of the people in Guantanamo with all these bright lights shining in my face. And so I can understand why they don't want to stay there very long. But in any case, you asked a big question, Professor. But you're right, there are, I would say, hellish places in the Middle East. I wouldn't say all of it is hell-like. And there are some places that are prospering and very much hoping to improve on their slot. But the Middle East, I think, for many years has been the focus of a mode of political and diplomatic management that is more concerned with managing a crisis rather than resolving it. And if we look back just recently to the Bush administration, which had the two-state solution, let's say, for the Middle East, the problem between Israel and Palestine. And the quartet was an American initiative on that issue. We even had a meeting in Annapolis in 2007 where all of the participants in that dispute gathered. And yet, there was nothing resolved. And so the Obama administration, I think, also has been following in that line, thinking that perhaps you can damp down the fires, but what is needed is putting out the fires. And if you look at Syria and Iraq, still in conflict and in civil war, and nobody is willing to put their foot down. And it's not just the United States. I'm just saying the United States as an example. It's the world community. We were talking in the professor's office earlier, and I was saying, problem in Syria now, more than 200,000 people have been killed. One would think that when those figures, even much less figures, had been reached, that humanity as a whole would be concerned and would say, enough is enough. Let's put a stop to it. But nobody's coming forward to do that. And people are trying to take advantage. And it's as if scoring points in a tennis match rather than concluding the match. And this, alas, I think works for other places in the area as well. If you take Yemen, if you take Libya, it's equally a view of managing a crisis rather than resolving it.
Dan, how do you see?
Thank you.
Just both from the perspective of Israel, but also somebody that looks at the whole region. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here. I'm delighted that the second year I'm doing this. Great time at Harvard, and I love the place. So it's a pleasure and to meet here. His Royal Highness Prince Turki Al-Faisal is an honor as well.
Thank you, sir.
I think that the Middle East is going through a major political, historical revolution in a way. I think on the realm of values, you have values competing here. There was an attempt that you could see in the Tahrir Square in Cairo, the people to try to get new, modern, less autocratic regimes. They were able to topple a regime down. And some people around the world, maybe in the country that hosts us, thought that if you only remove the bad guy, I don't think he was that bad, Mr. Mubarak, in no time, a new Thomas Jefferson is going to be born on the Nile and build a new republic. It happened that this didn't occur, and what you saw is forces that were subdued, unleashed out. Religious fanaticism, whether Shia or Sunnah, in every religion you have good people and bad people, very fanatic people, trying to bring religion as the paradigm to solve all the problems, not alongside other things, but this is, you had it with the Muslim Brotherhood, whose very motto, his very logo is Islam wal Khal, Islam is the solution for every problem, as you don't need to learn to do other things in life alongside your religious beliefs. And then there were the system that was built by the powers, the imperial powers, is shaking. You see the Middle East here in the map, you see part of it, the part that, as you say, is burning, or at least not quiet. And I think that we don't see the end of it yet. What one needs to see is to, if one can, to try to identify the sources of instability and threat, and on the other hand, the sources of stability that can help stabilize and restrain those forces that really want to change the world in a dramatic and bloody way. Without flattering, I think that Saudi Arabia and Israel are countries of stability and can do more together to help stability take its place. Other sources, whether it's Iran with their ambition and attempt to get nuclear and use terror in many groups, even in the Saudi kingdom, some groups that are helped by them, Shiite groups. If you see what's one calls here ISIS or Daesh or the Islamic State, is not a challenge, a regular challenge. It's a challenge to the whole system. So in cases like this, I think forces that want more stability and want to resolve things in a peaceful way should join hands. And if Americans will read the area rightly, they may understand even better, can I say it more politely, what needs to be done. One has to remember the use of force, as America used force, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't want to judge it, but did not yield results of stability. And it might have shown the limits of the power of America, not only the power itself. The feeling of weakness is not good. What do you do to build together the system? I think it's not a lost case. You saw trends and counter-trends, see Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood and then with the General Sisi in the public. You saw Tunisia going a certain way with the Nahda and then trying to find a way which looks much better now with a very interesting constitution which I read, combining the French ideas of liberté, égalité, fraternité with Muslim tradition. Very interesting. We are not at the end of the storm. We are still in the eye of the storm. And one needs to find a way that forces, Jordan, Egypt, I think, are countries we have peace with, and Saudi Arabia should be, I think, to take a role, and others to see that we work together not only against terror, which is important and things are done sometimes, but in a broader sense. And the Palestinian issue, which is something we need to resolve, you can't see it, it's so small there, needs to be resolved. It's not the source of everything, but it needs to be resolved alongside other things. We'll come to that later, I believe.
Sure. Let me stay with the big picture here for a second, though. We had the good fortune to have my old professor, Henry Kissinger, here 2 weeks ago. Henry's completed a new book at age 91 called World Order, which is an extremely good read. And he goes around the world and explains basically what's required to have order. And in every chapter, basically it doesn't quite say this, but the message is, you know, if you left it to me, I could make the order work pretty successfully there. Except in one chapter, the chapter on the Middle East, which is rather pessimistic. And basically, he says, well, looking at the Middle East, trying to think about where are we going forward, maybe the Middle East is caught in a confrontation akin to, but even broader than, Europe's pre-Westphalian wars of religion. The 30-Year War, which before it was finished, had succeeded in killing about a third of all the people that lived in Germany at the time. And then he even goes on and says, yeah, but maybe this is even more like the religious Reformation, which was a century of turmoil in Europe. So if you're looking at the scene today, which looks pretty complicated, is this like the high water mark, or is this early in a long story? And if Henry doesn't have many thoughts about what to do, how about the rest of us? Maybe one of you.
Well, I would venture to say that Mr. Kissinger had his chance to do things in the Middle East. And he was more successful than others, I would say, but also did not finish the job. And I remember in 1973, that was the year that I started working for the government. It started in September, and the Ramadan War We call it the October War or Yom Kippur. And it started a month after I began my work. And sure enough, it was due to American intervention that there was a ceasefire, and subsequently negotiations for what they were then called the disengagement talks, which is to separate the military forces along the Suez Canal between Egypt and Israel, and on the Golan Heights between Syria and Israel. But Mr. Kissinger devised what was then called the step-by-step approach. And I think if he had thought of it more in terms of a comprehensive package for that particular issue, which was based on Palestine and occupied territories by Israel in 1967, I think most of the things that we're facing now would not have occurred. Daesh, and by the way, for those of you who speak Arabic, I call it fahish, not Daesh. Fahish in Arabic means the worst of the worst, basically. And I don't think we should call it the Islamic State at all, but simply, really, just fahish. So please, if there are any journalists here or any historians or anybody who has a media influence, keep repeating that word. They just
Fahish.
They don't deserve anything to do with Islam or with a state or with Iraq or Syria. Fahish is a symptom. It is not the disease. In presently states, as also in Professor Allison's office, he referred to that. When Al-Qaeda was decimated, if you remember, in Afghanistan and then subsequently in Iraq, it didn't end there. Fahish came up. So unless you cure the disease, which is there now, you're going to have more fahishes coming up in the future. And the cure is apparent, at least to me. In Iraq, there is an attempt at a cure now with a national unity government that will include all the sects and the religions and the various subdivisions of Iraqi society. But it was 10 years after Mr. Maliki had practically brought down Iraq. So the 10 years that were wasted when we in the area were telling our friends everywhere, this man is not good for Iraq. He has to be changed. And then, finally, after so much suffering in Iraq, we have this national unity government. Hopefully, it will be able, with support from the rest of the world, to meet the challenge of fahish in Iraq. But you have another issue in Syria, equally devastating to Syria. 200,000 people killed. Everything in Syria has been practically destroyed. And yet, this man, Bashar al-Assad, clings to power, and the world lets him. The Russians give him arms, the Iranians send him troops and give him money, and America and Europe and other countries in the world simply turn their eye to what he's doing and concentrate on killing fahish. Fix Damascus and you can eliminate fahish. Get a national unity government in Damascus, and you will see how they can challenge these absolutely awful people who want not just to kill, but they want to dominate everybody. And this is, I think, where everybody should be going, and you ask for solutions.
Yeah.
The Arab League proposition 2 years ago to the United Nations talked about an interim government with full authority in Syria that will leave in place the institutions of government, but bring to trial those who are responsible for the killings. Unfortunately, the Russians and the Chinese vetoed that. The Arab League didn't stop there. We took it to the General Assembly just to get a moral support for it, and we did. 135 countries voted for it. Nothing happened. Then we had the American and Russian proposal of Geneva I and Geneva II. It also talked about an interim government. But nothing happened. Why? Because nobody is willing to put their foot on the ground. So they leave us in limbo.
Dan?
We just heard, I think, a very clear explanation of parts of the problems that we are facing, and I think we should try to find out what to do. It's not easy, but analyzing it would not be enough, of course. And I think there are two sources of instability. I'll say something about both. Once, His Royal Highness just spoke of the role of Iran in Syria. Iran directly, with the Al-Quds force, with Mr. Qasem Soleimani and others, with Hezbollah, as the agents are helping Mr. Assad to stay in power, killing people for him, being killed. They are Lebanese, they are not Syrians, but they evoke the Shiite alliance. And in Iran is continuing to destabilize the region, and the Fa'ish is the right way. Fa'ish that we spoke of is another source of danger, and one needs to find a way to cope with these two dangers. If one wants to have the world, so to speak, one speaks of world, one thinks of this country, America, take more active role, something dramatic should happen to show them that it's serious, it's not a simple story. To contain the ambitions of Iran, now 24th of November is approaching, the agreement will or will not be signed. If, a crazy idea, it is very important, I think, for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as it is important for Israel and to many countries in the area, that Iran does not become a dominating power. Just think of a meeting that would take place between the King of Saudi Arabia and the Prime Minister of Israel saying, we together call you the world, do something. We are getting our hands together, do something. I think even this country may be shattered and do something. If we want to fight and I think we should, the terror groups that use in vain and in a very ugly way the name of religion and God to promote their ideas, whether they believe in it or not is not important to me. One needs to cooperate in a very deep sense, not only intelligence-wise but otherwise, to show the alternative. Now in the end, some decisions that need to be taken by leaders in this country, including my country, call for leadership. The Israeli-Palestinian story that was mentioned here is an issue that is with us since day one, since I was born, or before. I was still born under the British mandate over Palestine, I have to say, but it's there and we need to resolve it. It's tough to resolve it, but the belief of some people that leaving it unresolved is possible is a mistake. It takes leadership, it's not easy. And leadership is something that many countries in the region have in shortage. So I think what is called for now is more cooperation, some dramatic action to show the necessity of harnessing the powers of the world, economic, even military threat, although military is always the last thing you want to do, needs to be there. Otherwise, it won't work. And I think it can be done. I think countries, I see the cooperation we have with two countries. We have signed an agreement of peace with, both the Republic of Egypt and the Kingdom of Jordan. And we have other connections with other countries, not on the table, under the table. We cannot solve everything. We are a small country, but I think we can add and help in that sense. I think the resolution, if possible, of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is of great help to us. And here I may differ somewhat. If we can't get a full resolution, the alternative is not sitting on our hands and doing nothing. I think we should start moving, and I think there are ways we may come to it later. Maybe the Saudi initiative that was proposed by the Saudi then Prince, then King Abdullah in 2001, was somewhat distorted in Beirut later in January Beirut by Nabil Sha'at, who was sent by Yasser Arafat to add the refugees inside and to make it a take it or leave it story. But basically it was the most advanced Arab position ever proposed to us. I think we can discuss it seriously. Can we have a conference, say in Amman, in Paris, Saudi Israelis, showing that something has changed. The world is changing radically before our eyes. We need to do something different to show that things are changing, and we need to change.
So it's a good question, Prince Turki. Is this the time for the Israeli-Saudi or Saudi-Israeli initiative?
Well, Mr. Meridor mentioned Iran's nuclear ambitions and the Palestinian issue. And on the Palestinian issue, I will remind us all that the kingdom's efforts go back to 1981. Those who are old enough to remember, with the Fahd Peace Initiative. King Fahd in 1981, for the first time after Camp David, managed between 1981 and 1982 to get full Arab support for an 8-point peace initiative with Israel that for the first time got all Arab countries to recognize that there is such a thing as a state of Israel. And before that, all the Arab states simply either called it the presumed state of Israel or simply didn't mention it at all.
Sahiyun,
And
Kiyan Sahiyun.
one of the interesting developments there was that that initiative was completely ignored, not only by America and others, but also more importantly by Israel. It was the one intended for that initiative. And then, of course, as His Excellency mentioned in 2002, the King Abdullah's initiative, equally when it came out with some distortions in the press, but it got a very negative view from Israel. And to talk now about Saudi-Israeli cooperation, when Saudi initiatives that would have, I think, been more than equitable in reaching a solution for the Palestinian and other occupied lands that still Israel occupies in Syria and in Lebanon, and to have ignored it, and how can we work with a country like that? His Excellency says, let's do new things. I suggest, as I did in another conference like this, to Ms. Tzipi Livni, who was in charge, and I think she still is in charge, of negotiating
Now
with the
still, yeah,
Palestinians.
still now. We don't know. Everything changes now.
Really?
I don't know. They say they come before.
1 hour at a
At this
time.
hour, she's still in charge. Yeah.
We're at a conference like this, and she was on the podium with the Araiqat and the U.S. representative on Mr. Kerry's team, Martin Indyk, and the moderator, and they're talking about it. And at the end, I asked Tzipi Livni, I said, Ms. Tzipi Livni, why don't you accept the Arab Peace Initiative? She gave me a very convoluted answer about how you can't expect people to do this and that, and you have to consider this and that. I said, just say yes. That's all it takes. Then you can put whatever conditions, but get us sitting together. The Arab Peace Initiative talks about not only 22 Arab countries, but also 56 Muslim countries engaging with Israel in peace and development and getting over the hang-ups. That, I think, is more of a reasonable and a logical way to deal with the issue of Palestine and so on. And then,
But let me pick it up just a level. Go to slide 3 here for 1 second. 3, yeah. No, next. 1.
What do we see there?
Here. Okay.
It's a good cartoon.
So now let's do Geopolitics 101. So this says, keep asking yourself, keep repeating, the enemy of my enemy is who? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So now, again, if you were just a simple-minded person watching the Middle East today, you would notice that it's hard to find what in Texas they would say a dime's worth of difference between Israel and the kingdom on Iran. Am I missing something?
I think the issue of Iran on the nuclear power, first of all, from the very beginning of negotiating between the P3, if you remember, Britain, France and Germany with Iran. This was going back to 2001, 2002. Singling out Iran at that time and putting ahead of Iran and telling them frankly, this is how the P3 did it. It's a carrot and stick approach we're having with you. If you come along with us, we'll give you the carrot. If you don't, you're going to get the stick. And then, of course, added to that, President George W. Bush's axis of evil, which included Iran in it. A more equitable view of all of this is what was agreed to by the NPT Review Conference in 2010 for establishing a zone free of weapons of mass destruction, where everybody in the Middle East will be put on no nuclear weapons, no chemical weapons, no biological weapons, and whatever agreements occur there. Now, in 2 weeks, as you said, sir, there is going to be an agreement between Iran and the United States and P5+1, or not. If there is an agreement, it will allow, inevitably, nuclear enrichment for Iran, at whatever level you may think. Call it 5%, call it 2%, but the process and the knowledge and the techniques will be available to Iran to do that. Immediately, I can tell you from this podium, without being in government, and I don't speak for my government, not only Saudi Arabia, but countries in the Middle East and outside the Middle East are going to demand to have the same opportunity to enrich uranium to whatever level is allowed to Iran. Where is there a stoppage of nuclear proliferation in that? You're going to have the technique spread worldwide. So isn't it better that we work toward a more conclusive end to proliferation by having full agreement between all the countries? Two interesting factors that I keep my mind on. One is that although Israel is not a signatory to the NPT, yet Israel managed to attend at least 2, if not more, sessions dealing with the zone free of weapons of mass destruction. To me, that is a positive sign from Israel. It's reassuring. But we need more. And not just from Israel. Because who scuttled that conference? It was supposed to be held in 2012 in December in Helsinki, Finland. 2 weeks before, the United States declared on its own that there was not enough preparation for the conference and that there should not be a conference.
But I still don't want to stay in the weeds. Dan, if a Martian were looking at this, he might imagine that Israel and the kingdom are secret allies, at least with respect to Iran. What would he be missing?
Well, I humbly tend to agree with your description. I would only say that if one needed any more proof to the gravity of the situation and the gravity of what may unfold, if Iran, in the eyes of the players in the region, becomes a nuclear or almost nuclear power, what they will do. Think of proliferation in the Middle East. In some countries, there's no shortage of money to buy whatever is needed. I don't want to mention names of countries, but you may think of some.
I can hardly think of any, yes.
Well, think of some. Not one, by the way, several. I'm serious about that. And the technology now is available on the internet. Once you had to go to Harvard or to MIT. Can I mention MIT here? My wife had a postdoc there. Okay.
Of course.
And other places. And it's dangerous in an unruly world where you have so many ambitions that of people have direct line to Almighty, knows what he wants and act for him. And if they get this potential, it's dangerous. And I think things need to be done now. And the cooperation that you have mentioned is of great importance. It cannot resolve all. You need all the forces that can act here. I think that negotiations with Iran is a right approach. Always negotiate. Smile. If he smiles, smile back. But alongside negotiations, you need to continue the pressure. The economic pressure on Iran led them to change at least the rhetoric, maybe some behavior, not good enough yet. And the option that was on the table, I'm the last one to push people to war, but the option needs to be there. If one thinks that America is weak, and this is what one hears from some people in Iran, and if people don't understand, it will change not in the Middle East, it will change the standing of America in the world if it happens. It's a different world. And one needs to understand how important it is. This is why I call for something that is dramatic, like Saudi Arabia, Israeli, and other Jordanian, Egyptian initiative now. And I would say that I think Israel should come with preparedness to rethink many things, because we need to see how we advance, see the new threats and opportunities that develop here. And the only addition I would have, and I started it earlier, with the Palestinians, it's tough. Now, Mr. Abbas, Dr. Mahmoud Abbas, doctor from Moscow University, can he speak for Hamas in Gaza? Do they accept? But suppose we agree with him. Can he impose it on Gaza? I leave the question open. I'm not going to dwell on it later. So I don't think we can wait. I think Israel should start doing things. I said it publicly in Israel. Maybe that's why I'm here, not in the government now, and it's fine. I'm happy with that. Great to be here. I think Israel can do certain things and refrain from doing certain things. Now, you know, the settlement policy should be a limit. Do it only in the areas that would become, as was mentioned, swapped, not other places. You can move much of the authority to the Palestinians. Don't be their policeman. Let them do it willy-nilly. You can start to describe a line and work towards it. There are things that we can do and to change the reality on the ground. I think it's important. It may not solve all the problems at once. You know, it's not very popular to mention Prime Minister Olmert these days. He has other problems. But he offered to Abbas in 2008, what I read in Condoleezza Rice's book, is a very comprehensive offer. And it wasn't picked up by Abbas, as did Barak with Yasser Arafat at Camp David. I was there. So it's not, I'm not saying there is no possibility. There may be a possibility. I don't want to say they don't want. I would negotiate on everything. But I don't wait. I think we need to move and try to create a better atmosphere for cooperation in the area against the real threats. The extreme Islamic fanatics, extreme. I mean, most people who are Islam believers are people like you and me. But those who take guns into their hands and want to turn the world upside down and rule it by caliphate, it's a crazy thing. It's dangerous. It's not worth it. It's dangerous. And Iran using it. So I think we need to do things and not only explain what they are.
So I'm going to stay with the theme of the emerging Israeli-Saudi alliance, if I were trying to be provocative. So with respect to Iran, I can't see much light between them. With respect to actually Israel-Palestine, if I listen to the conversation, I see a lot of commonality. But let's go to the slide about ISIL, we call it sometimes, or I'm going to learn to call it Fahash. Fahash. Okay. So a group that was called by President Obama in January, a JV team, has now taken control of an area that's bigger than the state of Indiana. So this is everything inside the line there. Its acronym, ISIL, that's its name, is the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. And by Levant, it paints on its map Israel off the map.
No,
so it literally erases
We are part of the
Israel. You're part of this.
Lebanon, Syria, Israel altogether.
In their map, Israel appears on their map. Okay.
No, we don't appear. They
No,
don't appear at all.
You disappear on their map. Okay.
Right.
In the case of Saudi, Fahash's idea that their Islamic caliphate is an existential threat to the kingdom's custodianship of the two holy mosques, as the Fahash people say quite explicitly. So how about from each of your own perspective, what threat does Fahash pose to the kingdom or to Israel? And if an existential threat to both, I go back to my cartoon and I'm thinking, well, here's another item in which it looks to me like There's an alignment of interests. So Dan, what do you think?
You know, sometimes people take arms into their hands and try to turn the world upside down. I think my distinguished friend here on the right did right when he used whatever he had to use years ago when some people wanted to take over the holy places in Mecca. It was almost a revolution there. And I read about it, not in our intelligence, but in books, published books. And they say that you had a very important role to play there and put things in quiet again. It wasn't easy. It could have changed the whole Middle East, the whole Muslim world in no time. So sometimes you need to use force, forgive me for the ugly word, as was used here, to stop these guys. They pose a threat of a different, to Israel of a different kind. When you have, for years, states fighting states, kings fighting kings, you know, in the old, from biblical times to no time, there are a paradigm of war. What do you do how do you defend, how do you attack? What are the rules of war? When you have what they call non-state actors, non-states, take Syria, which is now chaos. Suppose somebody from this group, or another group, Nusra, whatever, launches a rocket on us. Who do you respond to? The Syrian army? They didn't do it. This group, how do you know who this group is? It's a collapse of a system. So of course it's dangerous. The old way was maybe sometimes tough, but you had rules. A country, a kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the United States have the international law said you have to take care of your own territory, make sure that you don't attack other people. They collapsed the system. So it's much deeper and broader than a technical issue. So I think the cooperation that can be implemented and even broadened in intelligence collection is of great importance. The world today calls for and allows for much more intelligence cooperation between interested parties. I think there's a lot of common interest in several countries, not just one. But I say more than this. The people in the square in Cairo, Damascus, or in any other country needs to see that there is a hope, that there is another axis, not of evil, axis of people who are stable, normal, may not agree on everything, but want to stabilize the world and let them live ordinary life. And I think on this, some countries, I mentioned some of them, and you mentioned two, but the others can do something if they take the risks. It's a political risk, not easy for some Arab countries to do it with Israel. For us, Netanyahu will tell you what risk he has to take for this. But see the alternative. It's much too risky. So we need to do something dramatic to realign the Middle East facing these two threats and using the opportunities to bring in more stability, more cooperation, more economic development, because this is a poor area and people deserve it.
Prince Turki.
Fahish is dangerous. Anybody who is willing to throw himself with a suicide belt around him on top of a tank to explode the tank can do anything. And there's no way you can control that. Anyone walking through that door with that belt around him can take us all. So it is dangerous, but it is not, I would say, an existential danger, because as I said, you can find the cure for it. And non-state actors, historically, while they have been able historically to affect situations and change sometimes even borders, in the end, it was really the states that managed to deal with them. In the 70s, we all remember the Baader-Meinhof group. We all remember the Red Brigades, the Red Army in Japan and so on. They nearly turned Europe upside down. But in the end, those states got together and dealt with that situation. And I think Fahish is the same, as was dealt with Al-Qaeda in Saudi Arabia. The kingdom, alhamdulillah, managed to practically not eliminate, but at least forestall Al-Qaeda from doing any harm. And you've read, of course, about the arrests that we've had recently because of the attack on a Shia village in the eastern province. But to go back to the dramatic steps that Mr. Meridor calls for, I think there are dramatic steps that also Israel can do to help, not just the Arab Peace Initiative. And if Ms. Tzipi Livni had said yes, That would have been the most dramatic step for anybody at that time. But even on the nuclear issue, Israel insists it is not going to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East. When everybody knows, all of you here know, and of course Mr. Meridor knows above everybody, they're there. Just take the step. Join the NPT. Open your nuclear facilities to inspection, as everybody is demanding Iran to do. That will be a dramatic step that will convince us in Saudi Arabia to say, aha, here are at least some people in Israel who have taken the necessary step to bring them in with us in our concerns. That is one thing. The other thing, and I think one should not leave this unsaid or ignored, Mr. Meridor mentioned that Prime Minister Olmert offered Mahmoud Abbas in 2008 a solution. Mr. Olmert was leaving the premiership. He was already accused of corruption. He didn't have more than 2 months in his stay at that time. And how could Mahmoud Abbas sign on something that this man was offering him at that late hour? Equally, Mr. Barak in the year 2000. And it wasn't, if I may add, it wasn't Mr. Barak who offered Yasser Arafat the solution. It was Mr. Clinton. Clinton came to Arafat and said, Barak told me this, but it wasn't Barak who did it. And even then, Barak was going to lose the election to Mr. Sharon. So to blame Arafat and Abbas for not signing with the losing horse, I think is unfair. That doesn't absolve them from their mistakes and from their responsibility to think first of the people they're responsible for, the Palestinian people, and to have put them in the front lines in the Intifada after the Sharon walked in the Holy Mosque there in Jerusalem and suffer the killing that they suffered. I think that is a gross misuse, not only of government, but also of responsibility to your own people. And I'm not going to judge them. A higher authority is going to do that.
Let me let Dan make...
Let me just finish on one other thing. The issue of fahish equally, I think, affects us all, by the way. It's not just Saudi Arabia and Israel and Syria and Iraq. You've got Americans fighting there. Europeans have got Europeans fighting there. 2 or 3 teenage girls from Florida flew to Germany to go to join Fahish. Where did those girls grow? They didn't grow up in Riyadh or Skaka or Tabuk. No, in Miami, Florida. How did they get sucked into this, fulcrum of deceit and awful action? That is the question that we all have to ask of ourselves before we ask others to do it.
So Dan, I'm going to let you make a comment, but let me explain to the audience. We've come now for the time for questions from the audience after Dan's comment. And there are 2 microphones here on the ground floor, and there are 2 microphones at the loge. Please line up, and right after Dan makes a comment on this last comment from Prince Turki, we'll go to the audience. Dan?
I hate to go to the past because it's tough to agree about the past, and it's not necessary. Because everybody can have his own, what they call now in postmodern era, narrative. I have my narrative, you have your narrative, fine, let's live with that. That's how I never wanted the Palestinians to agree to my narrative. I don't want to agree to theirs. Let's live with that. We need to find a solution as to the future from now on. Not the past, the mustaqbal, what comes now, the future. But I have to say something, when I don't want to blame Mahmoud Abbas. I'm not playing a blame game. I ask myself as an assessment, as a person who was very much involved in these matters for many years, is there a chance to get the agreement? Now, see the situation, and I don't take Olmert's words nor Abbas' words, with all due respect. I read Condi Rice's book. I think she is objective. Don't think she has an ulterior motive here. This is the way I look at it. It's a very voluminous book. I have to admit, don't tell I didn't read all of it. I read the 50 pages that relate to this. This is what I read. And I take care as the true account. I think of this. Mahmoud Abbas, all his life, fought for the Palestinian cause. Since he was a child or a youngster, 48 and on, right? And after difficulties, he gets an Israeli prime minister who says to him, you get a Palestinian state, end of occupation, more or less 100% of the land with 60% swaps, dividing Jerusalem, some international regime, but no right of return, but 5,000 people. Now I think, yes, Olmert is not going to stay in power for many years, possibly, but let me ask in a very simple English, who cares? If he says yes, in no time, President of the United States and President of Russia and everybody, maybe even the Saudi king, will come and endorse it in Jerusalem. Nobody can run away from it anymore. Whatever Olmert, maybe Olmert would have won the election, but it's a different story. So it's not a good explanation to what happened. He didn't take it because he had to give one thing. He had to give one small sentence, end of conflict. No more claim. It's not easy. After all, let's not forget, I don't play it down. The Munazamat al-Tahrir, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was not built to get the territories. It was before, mainly for 48, to say we forsake this. There is Israel, these borders that we agree about, 67 changes, and that's the end of it. This is not as this needs courage, Sadat courage, King Hussein ibn Talal alayhi courage, and Menachem Begin and Rabin courage. Not everybody has this courage.
And not everybody can believe Americans and Europeans and so on when they let Oslo go to pieces. So, you know, it's not enough to have Mr. Meridor and say that, yes, if Abbas had agreed, then the Americans would have come in and the Russians and so on, and they would have supported.
I think we need to act regardless. I don't want to wait for him to agree. I'd love him to agree. I had so many negotiations. I met him years at my home with Abbas. And he was at my home 3 hours, we sat together. I sat with him, and with Arikat, there's no word we didn't exchange, good words. And most of what I said was in the press later, but never mind. I know that it's fine. Yeah. We didn't get there. And to wait another year, another decade, another century, for what? If there's no agreement, let's do what we can now. And this is, I think, what we should do.
Let's let this lady get into this. Please introduce yourself briefly. Brief question, ends with a question mark.
Thank you so much for a very informative discussion. My name is Asma. I'm a student at the Kennedy School. I have a question for His Highness Prince Al-Faisal. My question has two parts. The part one is that there's a lot of funding which is coming for Taliban in Afghanistan and in Pakistan from Gulf states and Saudi Kingdom itself. So what actions are being taken by the kingdom to stop this from happening? And the second part of the question is that we have seen a proxy war, Arab versus Persia, played out in the region for decades now. How do you see that going forward? Do you see an end to that anytime soon?
Your first question, you wanted to see stop what?
The funding which is being sent to Afghanistan and Pakistan for the Taliban from the Gulf state and the kingdom.
The funding?
Yes. What actions, what steps are being taken by the government to stop that from happening?
Well, the kingdom has literally stopped any contributions of funds by anybody to any group or institution or individual other than through official banking regulations, which have been devised not just by the kingdom, by the world community, through the United Nations. I think it's called FATA, and it is a system whereby any money can be traced where it's going to make sure that it gets to its lawful recipient. One cannot control individuals who take money in their pockets and go to Switzerland and from there fly to Peshawar, and from Peshawar go on to FATA and other places in Afghanistan and distribute the money. But with the excellent and getting even more excellent cooperation between countries on intelligence, even that is being curtailed, not just in Saudi Arabia, but I think by other countries. The kingdom proposed, and we're still waiting for that international counter-terrorism center to be put to work at the United Nations, which has received $200 million from the kingdom to set up the human capacity and the technical know-how to share intelligence between other countries, but also to share know-how and skills. There are many countries in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East that don't have good human resources to do their intelligence sharing. So the kingdom wants other countries to participate in this center. I think that's one way of going at it. Your other question was about?
It was basically about the proxy war which is being fought in the region for decades between Persia and Arab. How do you see that unfolding? And millions have lost their lives. It has an impact on a lot of people. So what do you think? When do you think it'll end?
There are two things that we can't change. One is history, and the other one is geography. Iran has been with us thousands of years, will continue to be with us. And that way, we talk to Iran. We have an embassy in Tehran, and they have an embassy in Riyadh. Our foreign minister met with their foreign minister at the United Nations. My expectation is when they met at the United Nations that each one of them gave to the other a list of the complaints that we have about each other. This is just a guess. I was not privy to the talks. And each of them said to the other, okay, we'll look into them, and then we must get back and see how we can eliminate that. Saudi complaints about Iran are, first, interference in Arab affairs. You have Iran in Lebanon, you have Iran in Palestine, you have Iran in Syria, you have Iran in Iraq, you have Iran in Bahrain, you have Iran in Yemen, etc. That's one complaint. The other complaint, media. Look at all of the plethora of Iranian media beamed at our side of the Gulf. It's full of invective and all sorts of incitement for Shia communities to rise up against governments in our side of the world. That's another complaint. Third complaint we have Iran is nuclear. One of your graduates from Harvard Kennedy School, I think, was former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kuwait, Mohammed al-Sabah.
Yeah.
I think his son is studying here as well. He tells a story, and I don't think I'm doing him any injustice by repeating it because I've heard it from others as well. He was sent by the GCC to President Ahmadinejad in Iran in 2005, after the summit that took place in Kuwait, with a message to the Iranians saying, your nuclear program is not only an issue of nuclear weapons, but also an issue of ecology and an issue of danger of accidents happening. And you're working with the Russians who've had a bad accident in Chernobyl. The answer of Mr. Ahmadinejad to the foreign minister was, Mr. Minister, you have nothing to worry about. We're not using Russian technology, we're using Iranian technology. And the minister looked at him and he said, if that is your position, there is nothing for us to talk about. So that is another complaint that we have about Iran's nuclear issues, because they have kept things secret, as Israel has done, you know. So
Unfair.
Put it all on the ground.
Good.
You know, on the table, bear it out, and let everybody see it. And that's all we ask for.
This gentleman is next. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Frank Brumell. I'm an MPP student here at the Kennedy School. I wanted to thank you both for coming here. My question relates to Syria. Earlier we discussed how there have been 200,000 killed in Syria. We've got many refugees, internally displaced persons. And looking over the past couple of years, the most powerful forces outside of the Syrian government within the country have been either al-Nusra or since their break, ISIS. Given that, and given that you've described ISIS as the worst of the worst, would it make sense for the United States, the West, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others to support Bashar Assad in his efforts to control the country in order to end the war and prevent ISIS or those allied with them from eventually taking power within the country?
My answer to that is no. And I explained why. Because, as I said, because of the disease in Damascus, because of Assad's persecution of all Syrians, ISIS comes up and takes a place in the world. So if you empower Assad, you're merely, as another former foreign minister, I don't think he graduated from here, of the UK, said in a conference like this, when somebody made that suggestion, he said, Assad is the best recruiting force for Daesh, for Fahish. They point to him, and thousands of people will come to them. So you'll be empowering the wrong man. Empower the people who are fighting Assad on one side and fighting Fahish on the other. These are the people you have to empower.
What do you say, Dan?
We are in a very fortunate position. I'll tell you a secret. From in the beginning of the turmoil in Syria in 2011, we had meetings. There was a group in Israel, in the government, that was called the Sextet, Quintet, Septet, number of ministers like it, chamber music, orchestration, and we used to discuss these things day and night, all sorts of issues. Very interesting discussion with the Prime Minister and Defense Minister. And there was a question, what is our position with what happens with Syria? ISIS was not there, Daesh or Fahish was not yet there. What should we do? And I remember after discussing, is this good for us, that good for us? I remember saying, or hearing from others that give others, whatever we want to do, we can't do anything. If we help him, he's dead, because the Jews help him. That's the worst. If we fight against him, we help him by fighting against him. Now everybody will fight against the Jews with him. So we are in a very good position that whatever we think is not important, we can't do much. It's not like it in the Arab world. I don't want to go into in Syria. This Assad regime, like his father before him, representing a minority of Alawites, I thought my business, I'm not going into go into that, but they use force in an awfully brutal way. And let me speak as a human being. I mean, I'm a neighbor. I don't see the atrocities, I see them on television, but who could have thought 4 years ago, 200,000 people, children, women, even men should be killed, by the way, not only children. What is it? And nobody can win it in a way. I mean, he may still rule what they call the Alawite part of, I don't want to go into the geographic, that's too big a map for this. But it's over in a way. They can't go back to what there was. So is there a way, did he really care? By the way, he may think that if he's out, the Alawite will be slaughtered. The whole thing is not that simple. But I mean, he was a staunch enemy of ours. He did keep the border quiet because there was deterrence. Again, the role of Iran came in. Iran is using him. They tried to build their power in their region historically. Now, I'm not going to go into that. I'm not a Muslim. I don't want to go to give the Muslims advice as what to do in Sunni, Shia, but I understand somewhat. To think that Iran will govern the world by using terror, incitement, the way it was just described, and by getting nuclear and being hegemonic because of this. Some countries say, well, we can't win them, we can't beat them, join them. It's danger. It's very dangerous. So I think that Syria should be seen in that broad context. And we can't do much about it now, but we need to act now. I think we, SMU, all of us, we need to act now. You all saw here, you heard here, things that were said by both of us. We didn't plan anything in advance. We met just half an hour ago. And there is a lot of convergence. We don't agree on everything, the differences, but we need to overcome the difficulty that is impeding us from creating a new Middle East in a good sense. We need it because other forces are acting, whether it's Assad and the Iranians and the Shiite militants, or the crazy hysterical people on the Fahish or Daesh or Hezbollah or Hamas. It's dangerous. It's humans' life. It's people in the end. So what needs to do, and the leadership needs to forget the past and forget other things and focus on the main thing: how we stabilize the Middle East, how we allow the good forces in the end to win.
Okay, we have about 7 minutes left, so short questions and short answers. And this gentleman in the loge, please.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Sabah Mohammed Sabah. I'm
There he is,
Kennedy
From
student.
Kuwait.
He's the son.
My father did graduate, but not from here, from the university itself, economics department. My question is for Prince Turki. مساك الخير طال عمرك.
يا هلا ومرحبا يلا حبيبي.
What is your assessment of yesterday's GCC summit in Saudi? In your opinion, will the GCC develop their own capabilities as a major military force in the region? And finally, the impact of ISIS or Fahish, will it be something to cooperate or conflict with Iran? So just your comments, please.
First, I think thanks to the Kuwaiti efforts to bring the GCC countries together, finally, alhamdulillah, at the summit yesterday in Riyadh, they agreed to do that. And Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and UAE sent back their ambassadors to Qatar. It was a needless and useless and absolutely foolish effort on whoever it was part that brought us apart. And thankfully, there are people like the Sheikh of Kuwait who takes a personal interest in keeping the GCC together, that we are there, and I think the GCC will continue to develop. Developing military capability is an important issue for us, seeing as how developments have come about. For years, when I was in intelligence, and I'm sure subsequently, etc., arms suppliers, whether in the West or the East, perhaps for their own interest, kept a very careful measure of who gets what and when and how. So most of our countries, whether in Saudi Arabia or the GCC countries, fell within that framework wherever we bought our weapons. And when Americans sold us weapons, they didn't sell us their best weapons. When our officers were trained in American colleges and so on, there were certain classes that they weren't allowed to go in, as others were not allowed to go in, that dealt with sensitive issues that America wanted to keep for itself. So for years, the GCC was not capable of undertaking the necessary steps militarily to meet threats like that. But circumstances force themselves on everybody. The effort to liberate Kuwait from Iraqi occupation under Saddam Hussein forced America, if you like, to come clean on many of these weapons systems that they had kept back, because there was a need to integrate Saudi, Qatari, Kuwaiti, Emirati, Bahraini, Omani, etc. And so GCC countries benefited from that in terms of know-how, better training, better equipment, more advanced technologies, etc., etc. And now I think this new coalition that we have fighting ISIS is equally imposing on America to share more openly what they have with the rest of the coalition. And that, I think, will give the GCC countries the ability to go forward and develop the capability to meet challenges like that. We will never be able to meet all the challenges by ourselves. I don't think any country can. The US itself can't. We've seen that. So, yes, I think there is an opportunity for the GCC to go forward. You had a third question as well.
Just in terms of ISIS or Fahish, their impact with Saudi, will there be cooperation or conflict there?
With Iran?
With Iran, yes.
Yeah. Well, Iran talks the good talk, but they don't walk the good walk. They talk about fighting Fahish. I have not seen, either in Iraq or in Syria, Iranian troops fighting Fahish. What I see in Syria, for example, is Iranian troops killing Syrian civilians. And in Iraq, even the Shias, the Iran-supported militias that have been galvanized now to meet Fahish in Iraq, they've been going after the supposedly Arab Sunni tribes that everybody's trying to get to fight Fahish, and they've been going after them. So I see, you know, a very strange situation where Iran says it is fighting Fahish, but it's not. And I see Fahish equally saying that one of their big aims is to fight Iran. But I haven't seen them strike any Iranian targets. And so this is a big question, and I think if there were any Iranian officials here, I think they should be asked about whether Iran is serious or
Dan
not.
will speak on their behalf.
I have, of course, no idea, but I think that one needs to ask oneself, why should Iran fight Fahish or ISIS? ISIS weakens the Sunni countries first, not the Shia countries. They're after the Sunni countries. So I don't know. The Iranians don't consult me on anything, not on this or anything else. For them, it's not that bad that the Sunni rulers are fighting with their own people. So I'm not sure there is objectively a way to cooperate. Moreover, let me give an advice to this host country. If America aligns itself with Iran, it may not win ISIL, but it loses the Sunni world. So it's going to be a big mistake.
So this gentleman in the loge.
Thank you, sir. So my name is Ibrahim. I'm a junior here at the college, studying economics. Not going to be a prime minister. Given the U.S. has...
Be a rich man, don't be a prime minister.
I hope. We all hope so.
Become a finance minister. Keep going.
Given that the U.S. has certain interests in the region, call them X, call them Y, call them I, whatever they are, to what extent is the instability that we see today a result of the U.S.'s efforts to protect those interests? What we see in Egypt, what we're seeing in Iran, what we're seeing in Syria. And this is a question for everyone, just a general idea. I want to hear your thoughts.
What was the question?
So to what extent is like what's happening today, the instability that we see today, a result of the U.S.'s efforts to protect its interests in the region, regardless of what those interests are?
To what extent have actions by the U.S. contributed to the mess that we see now?
I don't think that they have a significant contribution. I think the problems are much deeper than that. The American administration might have made mistakes. Along the way, all of us make mistakes. And there might have been mistakes in doing this or that, and I had my own criticism regarding the issue, but I think it goes deeper than that. You see a huge battle within these countries. The map that you see here, America might have done better or worse, but I don't think it starts from there. I said earlier, many countries in the world love to ask America to help them and then shout, Yankee, go home and curse America. America cannot solve all the problems in the world. In fact, I'm not an American. I don't want America to solve my problems. But in fact, when America used, before President Obama, there was President Bush, the second. And he used force twice, very significantly. And I'm not criticizing it. And I was not against it, I have to say. He didn't ask me. And the end result is that America is not building a state in Iraq. ISIS is trying to build a state in Iraq now. So the force, without force, you may be dead. I may be dead without force. In this world, you need to be strong. But force cannot solve everything. And by the way, force is not only military force. Can America and the other parts of the world help economically, help ideologically, help culturally? I think maybe things can be done. But part of what we see here is in the modern world, where communication is open to everybody, ideas flow, borders don't stop them, and people want something different for themselves. Some of it is nice. The whole world was with the people in the square in Cairo because they spoke wonderful slogans. But then the other forces that are deeper and somewhat darker are stronger. And unfortunately, if you don't use intelligently your power, as His Royal Highness said earlier, sometimes you need to do it. I mean, if you don't do it, they'll have Bahrain the way Bahrain was almost there, and the Saudis took some steps to say, yeah, hey, there's a limit. We heard all the wonderful talk, but there's a limit. We need to take care of our interests. So America cannot solve all the problems. America can help coalesce the world. On Iran, America and President Obama are the main players. Because if you don't want to be in this binary position, go to war or acquiesce in nuclear Iran, you need to have a sound and strong policy now. And America is the only one who can lead it. I think this is of great importance. if America is seen to be leaving the scene, I don't think it is, but it's seen like that, it calls for others to step in and fill this vacuum. It's dangerous. Because after all, and again, I don't want to flatter, but I think that America stands for the values that I was born on, raised on, we believe in, of liberty, freedom. This is what America stands for. And it cannot fight for everybody, but if America loses and goes home, so to speak, it's a much tougher world. So I have criticism on America, you have, we have, but after all, it's the forces of good and the causes and the values that we want to see prevail in the end.
So we're officially at our ending time, but what we're going to do is let this lady and this gentleman put your questions very briefly, and then maybe ask for 1-minute answers by our panels. So please.
Hi, my name is Leanne Scarzoni, and I teach English as a second language predominantly to Saudi nationals, so this is for His Royal Highness. Saudi young people have the highest Twitter use in the entire world with 150 million tweets a month, and one of your clerics recently called social media absolute evil. As someone with experience with both the US and your kingdom, do you encourage your college students to keep ties to the rest of the world through social media, even if it disagrees with the kingdom?
So wait, we're going to get both questions. This gentleman.
Thank you. My name is Amir Eitan. I'm a second year at HBS. I would like to ask about Israel's negotiation strategy. That is, if you have one side that strongly believes that the other side broken into his house, killed his son, and locked him up in a basement, and the other side response is, I cleared the kitchen, and let's look forward. Do you think that's like a good negotiation strategy for the state of Israel?
Good. So you will answer the first and you the second. Briefly, please.
Well, whoever said it was evil and so on, I thought this is freedom of speech. Yani you're speaking in a country where people can say even more awful things than that. So if they think that Twitter is evil, fine. Let them think that. I don't think the king thinks Twitter is evil because Twitter, as you said, is spread all over Saudi Arabia. I don't use Twitter myself, basically because I don't know how to. But you know, social media is good and bad. If you look, Fahish, where is it getting its recruits from? Using social media. So is there a necessity to look at that and say something has to be done? I think there is. Like you deal with pornography, like you deal with, you know, criminal issues that are being propagated on social media. So yes, I think media is not a tool that can be easily let, you know, to take its course without question. I'm not the one to do it because I don't know how to use it. But I'm sure there are people who can. Just on the issue of previously on America. In America today, and I heard the figure and I may be wrong, there are 80,000 Saudi students spread all over. I think some of them are here.
It's 300,000.
No, it's 80,000. The whole total program is 300,000 maybe, but it's all over the world. Anyway, those students came to America because they believe they want to get their skills and know-how in America. They weren't forced to come to America. They choose to do it, and they apply to universities before they get the scholarship. So why are they coming here? It's not just to sit in Harvard or MIT or Cornell and so on, but they engage with Americans. And they learn and they teach just from that engagement. And more importantly, their parents are quite happy for them to come and finish their studies in America. That shows you, to me, the value of America in our part of the world. Any Yemenis here?
Okay.
Okay. My Yemeni friends, Yemen, they have a wonderful saying describing America, I think, and the rest of us. They say, we are two bottoms in one jockey short. Basically. Shall I say it in Arabic or it would be too vulgar? And I think that's the case. So if anybody thinks that America can pivot east or pivot west or go to the moon or go, reality is reality. And we saw Fahish with the execution of these Americans forcing the hand of American administration to come up with a plan to deal with Fahish. One last word, Mr. Belfer. I had a good talk with you before I came here, and he had some even more sensitive questions than you guys did posed to me. But I invited him to come to Saudi Arabia to see for himself, and I hope he will. And if there is anybody here who would like to also to come to Saudi Arabia, please do.
Anybody?
You have to do things first. Accept the Saudi peace plan and you can come.
Dan, you get the last word in answer to what kind of a negotiating strategy is this?
Before I buy a ticket to Riyadh, I'll try to answer the question. Although I'd love to come when I do the things, or when you do the things. All right. I'm out of the government for a year and a half now because I have some critical position on government. I don't want to do it abroad. It's something that I try to keep not doing. But I can say, to me, the problem is not the tactics. Tactics may be wrong or right. The problem to me is that the government needs to set a goal. I don't know what the goal is. What is the goal? What border do you want in the end? Do you want to one state? You want to say what the goal is and try to act there. So this is my problem. But let me say something after this is the last question, that may not sound coherent with what we heard here. I think we live in a world where we take our information from television, from the social networks, from what happened yesterday, and tomorrow will be another day, not the Scarlet O'Hara, another day, something different. And we are very impressed, and we may sometimes lose perspective. From the Israeli perspective, which I represent here, which I live all my life, I see a very positive trend. For the last 66 years, we exist as a reborn state in that land, starting from almost nothing in terms of money, people, asymmetry. And we got to a place that I want to boast of formal peace with some Arab countries, informal agreements with other Arab countries, resolving issues, getting economies that is booming, technology, science, and people that are relatively happy. Is that the end of the story? No. Troubles and problems, but all over the world is like this. What needs to be done is to have leadership that is ready to take the risks necessary to continue marching on that road. We are not on a losing road. We are, I think, on a winning road, not only Israel. I think there's a lot of potential. The Middle East is so much backwards that there's a lot of potential to move up. When a country that is very much backward in terms of GDP per capita, of poverty of people, see China. They move like a cellar train I took yesterday. Not like the one that goes step by step. There's a lot of potential. One needs to try to rid oneself from the old paradigms and hatreds. It's not easy. We are all with the same thing because the challenges and the opportunities are so great now ahead of us. And in that sense, the two countries whose citizens sit here, His Royal Highness and my humble me here, I think we need to, and other people, we need to take those steps to change the Middle East. It's not changing by the hand of God, with all due respect, not changing by the hand of people in the street. Countries and governments have a lot of power if they're ready to take some risks to move. Others are working, and we need to work, and this a meeting like this should not be, I'm not in government now, should be everyday meeting with the governments. What do we do? Economically, intelligence-wise, against the bad guys, for the good guys. Why don't we do it? This is what I think the message that we should carry from here.
Another message you must hear is, with Israeli, Jewish money, and Arab brains, we can do quite a lot.
So let me say thank you on behalf of us who live here at Harvard and the Kennedy School. This extraordinary evening, two quite remarkable individuals. Thank you for sharing so much wisdom, and let's say thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were great.
Now we can take the